The afternoon sun cast a warm, honey-colored glow across the quiet streets of Willowbrook Heights, a high-end suburban neighborhood just outside Atlanta. The houses here were grand without being ostentatious. White columns, manicured lawns, driveways lined with fresh hydrangeas. The kind of place where every blade of grass seemed to have been cut with the same precision. At the end of Willow Lane stood 42 Willowcrest Drive, a two-story colonial with pale stone walls, a wraparound porch, and a for sale sign planted in the perfectly trimmed front yard. It was the kind of home that exuded history and stability. In a small real estate office downtown, Marcus and Danielle Johnson sat side by side at a polished oak desk. Marcus, tall and broad-shouldered, wore a navy button-down and pressed khakis. Danielle, with her soft curls pulled into a low bun, had on a sleeveless cream blouse and a pair of gold stud earrings shaped like tiny suns. Across from them sat Catherine Whitfield, the listing agent. Catherine was in her late 40s, with sleek blonde hair and a tailored blazer, the exact shade of pale gray stone. She exuded confidence, perhaps too much of it, and spoke with the kind of clipped politeness that always felt just a little too rehearsed. Danielle leaned forward slightly, her tone warm. "We saw 42 Willowcrest on your agency's website. It's beautiful. Exactly what we've been looking for." Marcus nodded. "We're ready to put down a serious offer if it's what we expect inside. Would you be able to schedule a viewing this week?" Catherine's smile was quick, but there was a flicker in her eyes. "Oh, 42 Willowcrest? Yes, it's nice," she said as if the word had to be measured. "But I'm afraid it's under a lot of interest right now. Very competitive market." "That's fine," Marcus said easily. "We're pre-approved, no contingencies. We can be flexible on timing if needed." Instead of writing down their request, Catherine set her pen aside. "You know, I'm not sure this property is quite the right fit. The neighborhood has a particular culture. You might be more comfortable with one of our other listings. There's a lovely home near Oakwood Park I could show you." Danielle's brows knitted, but her voice stayed calm. "We've already looked at Oakwood Park. Willow Crest is the one we want to see." Catherine gave a small, almost apologetic shrug. "It's really best we focus on areas that would be more accommodating. I'll send you a few options this evening." The air in the office seemed to shift, the subtext loud enough to fill the silence. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he reached over and gave Danielle's hand a small squeeze under the desk. They stood a moment later, Danielle's polite smile firmly in place. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Whitfield." "Of course," Catherine replied, already glancing back down at her paperwork. As they stepped out into the parking lot, the late afternoon lights spilling across their car, Marcus exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, unlocking the door for Danielle, "I think that told us everything we need to know." Danielle glanced back at the glass door of the office, where Catherine was still visible at her desk, head bent over her files. A quiet determination sparked in her eyes. "Yeah," she said softly, "and I have a feeling she's in for a surprise." 3 weeks later, the sun was shining through the tall glass windows of the Whitmore and Steele law offices, casting warm squares of light across the long mahogany conference table. The air smelled faintly of leather and fresh coffee, the muted hum of a copier somewhere in the background. Marcus and Danielle sat side by side, dressed in the same calm, professional style they had worn to the real estate office that day. Only now, their posture was different. Marcus's shoulders were relaxed, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Danielle had her notepad open, pen in hand, but there was an unmistakable glimmer of excitement in her eyes. Across from them sat Thomas Reed, a seasoned real estate attorney with salt and pepper hair and the easy, confident manner of someone who had handled hundreds of property transactions. Beside him, a representative from the bank, a woman with short dark hair and a sharp blue blazer, flipped through a neat stack of loan documents. "All right," Thomas said, tapping the file in front of him. "The title search came back clear. The sellers have signed off on all terms, and your financing is in order. This," he slid the thick packet of papers toward them, "is the final closing documentation for 42 Willowcrest Drive." Danielle's lips curved into a smile at the sound of the address. She glanced sideways at Marcus, who gave her a subtle nod. The attorney continued, "I have to say, this was one of the smoother transactions I've seen this month. The sellers were happy to work with you directly, and bypassing the listing agent sped things up significantly." Marcus chuckled. Yes, we noticed. There was a brief flicker of amusement between him and Danielle, unspoken but shared. The attorney gestured toward the signature lines. All right, let's make it official. One by one, they signed. The deed, the mortgage agreement, the disclosure forms. The sound of pens scratching on paper felt momentous in the quiet room. With each page they signed, the property was becoming more theirs. When the last signature was done, the bank representative neatly stacked the documents and slid them into a leather portfolio. Congratulations, she said warmly. You're now the official owners of 42 Willowcrest Drive. Danielle exhaled slowly, almost as if she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand, the warmth of his palm steady and sure. The attorney stood, shaking both their hands firmly. I think you're going to love it there. It's a beautiful home. And from the sound of it, the neighborhood could use more people like you. Danielle's smile deepened. We're looking forward to meeting our neighbors. As they walked out of the office into the crisp afternoon air, the keys to the house jingled lightly in Marcus's pocket. The sun caught on the small metal teeth, flashing bright for an instant. Danielle glanced up at him. So, when do you want to move in? Marcus grinned. Not yet. I think we should wait for the perfect moment. Her brow lifted. And when's that? He looked toward the horizon with a slow, deliberate smile. When she's there to see it. It was a bright Saturday morning in Willowbrook Heights. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming magnolias from the neighboring yards. The street was unusually lively. Several residents were out tending to their gardens or walking their dogs. The for sale sign in front of 42 Willowcrest was gone, replaced by a fresh expanse of grass where the stake had been pulled from the earth. Catherine Whitfield's silver luxury sedan pulled up to the curb in front of the house. She stepped out in tailored cream slacks, a silk blouse, and oversized sunglasses. A small leather folio was tucked under her arm. She moved briskly, her heels clicking on the driveway. This was supposed to be a quick visit. She had a prospective client, a couple from out of state, interested in seeing if the house was still available. She hadn't bothered to check the closing records. In her mind, the sale was still pending, and there was always a chance she could insert herself into the process if the deal fell through. As she walked up the porch steps, she noticed movement inside through the tall bay window. Furniture had been rearranged. Fresh flowers sat in a vase on the entryway table. She frowned slightly. She didn't remember the sellers decorating like that. Then, the front door opened. Marcus stood there, dressed casually in a charcoal sweater and jeans, a set of keys dangling from his hand. Sunlight poured over his shoulder into the entryway, catching on the polished hardwood floors inside. For a moment, Catherine's expression didn't change. She was still in professional mode. Oh, hello, she said, her tone the kind one might use with a stranger at a shop. I was just stopping by. Is the owner in? Marcus's smile was calm and measured. Yes, he said, leaning lightly against the doorframe. The owners are both here. A moment later, Danielle appeared beside him, holding a steaming mug of coffee. She wore a soft cream sweater and jeans, her curls loose around her shoulders. Her eyes met Catherine's, and there was no mistaking the recognition there. Catherine blinked, a flicker of unease crossing her face. You live here now? Marcus's voice was steady, almost casual. We don't just live here, he said. We own it. The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment, heavier than they should have been. Catherine's lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak right away. Her grip on the leather folio tightened just a little. Danielle took a slow sip from her mug before adding, We closed 2 weeks ago, directly with the sellers. From the sidewalk, a neighbor waved cheerfully. Welcome to Willowbrook. Danielle and Marcus both smiled warmly and waved back. Catherine stood frozen on the porch, her practiced composure beginning to crack. Well, Marcus said finally, his tone even but firm, if you'll excuse us, we have some unpacking to finish. Danielle stepped back into the foyer, Marcus following, and the door closed gently but decisively. Catherine remained there for a moment, staring at the closed door, the sound of muffled laughter from inside, drifting through the glass. For the first time in a long while, she found herself at a loss for words. By late afternoon, word had spread through Willowbrook Heights like a summer breeze carrying gossip. The new owners of 42 Willowcrest weren't just moving in, They were already settled, and they were nothing like the usual arrivals to the neighborhood. Neighbors who had been in their yards that morning told the story with animated gestures. The elegant black couple, the warm smiles, the friendly wave. One woman, trimming her roses, swore she'd seen them bring in stacks of art canvases and musical instruments. Another mentioned how Danielle had stopped to compliment her flower bed and ask about the best place for fresh produce in town. By evening, small clusters of residents gathered along driveways and sidewalks, exchanging bits of what they knew. Most of it was harmless curiosity, tinged with surprise. But there were undertones Catherine couldn't ignore when she overheard them later. Catherine had returned to her office after the morning's shock, but she hadn't been able to focus. She kept replaying the scene on the porch. Marcus's calm delivery, Danielle's steady gaze. The image of the keys swinging lightly in Marcus's hand stuck in her mind. She decided to drive back through Willowbrook in the late afternoon, telling herself she was just checking on another listing. But when she passed 42 Willowcrest, she slowed the car almost imperceptibly. The couple was outside now, chatting with Mr. Harrington, the elderly man who lived next door. He was known for being particular about his lawn and for keeping conversations brief. But now he was laughing, actually laughing, as Marcus pointed toward the street where a little boy rode past on a bike. Danielle had crouched down to pet Mr. Harrington's golden retriever, who was leaning into her hand with obvious affection. Further down the street, Mrs. Kelly, one of the HOA board members, was speaking in low tones to another neighbor. Catherine couldn't catch every word, but she did hear. Didn't even go through our local agents, straight to the sellers. They seemed nice enough, but still, Catherine felt a prickle of irritation, though she couldn't decide if it was at their words or at the way the couple seemed to win people over so effortlessly. When she finally turned her car back toward the main road, she caught one last glimpse of Marcus and Danielle standing together in the warm glow of the setting sun, waving at a passing jogger. They looked utterly at home, as if Willowbrook Heights had been waiting for them all along. And for the first time that day, Catherine wondered, not with anger but with a strange, uneasy curiosity, if perhaps she had misread not only them, but what kind of people truly belonged in this neighborhood. The monthly Willowbrook Heights HOA meeting was usually an uneventful affair. Half an hour of budget updates, landscaping reminders, and the occasional debate about seasonal decorations. But that Tuesday evening, the clubhouse buzzed with more energy than usual. Rows of folding chairs filled the small, carpeted hall. At the front, a long table with a white tablecloth held pitchers of water, stacks of agenda papers, and a bowl of butterscotch candies that had been there since last year. Catherine sat near the front with her usual circle of colleagues and acquaintances. She wore a crisp navy blazer and a string of pearls, her back perfectly straight. She told herself she was only there to stay involved in the neighborhood's happenings. But in truth, she was curious to see how the new owners of 42 Willowcrest would fit in. She didn't have to wait long. The double doors opened and Marcus and Danielle walked in. Marcus wore a tailored charcoal suit without a tie, his posture relaxed yet confident. Danielle was radiant in a simple emerald green dress that caught the light with every step. Both carried warm, easy smiles, greeting people as they made their way inside. The subtle shift in the room was unmistakable. People straightened in their seats, conversations paused mid-sentence. Even Mrs. Kelly, who rarely smiled at newcomers, rose slightly from her chair to shake Danielle's hand. When they reached the front row, Marcus stopped to greet Mr. Harrington. "Good to see you again, sir," he said warmly. "Likewise," Harrington replied, patting him on the back. "Glad you two could make it." The meeting began as usual, but halfway through, HOA President Linda Foster cleared her throat. "Before we move on to the budget, I'd like to welcome our newest neighbors officially, Marcus and Danielle Johnson of 42 Willowcrest." There was a polite round of applause, but it wasn't the perfunctory kind Catherine had expected. It was genuine. Marcus rose to speak, thanking everyone for the warm welcome. Then Danielle stood beside him, adding, "We're excited to be part of this community. We've always believed that strong neighborhoods are built on connection, and we're looking forward to hosting a charity fundraiser right at our home next month to benefit the local school arts program." A ripple of surprise went through the room, followed by murmurs of approval. Mrs. Kelly beamed. Someone from the back called out, "Count me in!" Catherine felt her stomach tighten. Not only were they fitting in, they were taking initiative, instantly becoming people the neighborhood wanted to rally around. When the meeting ended, guests flocked to speak with Marcus and Danielle. Catherine lingered near the table, pretending to check her phone, but her eyes kept drifting toward the couple, watching as they navigated every conversation with grace. By the time the crowd began to thin, Catherine realized she was no longer wondering if they belonged here. She was starting to wonder why she hadn't seen it from the start. 2 weeks after the HOA meeting, the Johnsons' housewarming party was the talk of Willowbrook Heights. Invitations had been hand-delivered, heavy cream cardstock with embossed lettering, and the guest list included nearly every neighbor, along with a few members of the local school board and community leaders. That Saturday evening, the lights of 42 Willowcrest glowed warmly against the darkening sky. The wraparound porch was strung with soft golden fairy lights, and a faint melody of jazz drifted out from inside. The air smelled faintly of gardenias from the planters along the steps, mixed with something rich and savory from the kitchen. Catherine arrived just after 7 p.m., dressed in an elegant black cocktail dress, a small hostess gift in her hands, an expensive bottle of wine she'd picked up on the way. She told herself she was there to show goodwill, but her nerves betrayed her as she hesitated at the foot of the porch. The front door swung open before she could knock. Danielle stood there, radiant in a flowing ivory dress, her curls pinned up with delicate gold clips. "Catherine," she said warmly, as though greeting an old friend. "I'm so glad you could make it. Please come in." The entryway was transformed. Polished hardwood gleamed, and the air held the scent of fresh lilies from a tall vase in the corner. Catherine's eyes swept the room, taking in the tasteful decor. Soft, earth-toned rugs, framed art pieces that hinted at both local culture and world travel, and a grand piano in the living room, with sheet music open to a Duke Ellington composition. Guests mingled easily, neighbors laughing together, glasses of wine in hand, plates filled with catered hors d'oeuvres. Marcus moved through the room with an ease that was almost magnetic, shaking hands and making introductions. Every so often, he'd pause to refill a guest's drink or check that the music volume was just right. Catherine found herself talking to Mrs. Kelly, who was gushing about the Johnsons. "Did you hear? The fundraiser next month has already surpassed its initial goal, and it hasn't even happened yet. Marcus has connections in the city council, and Danielle's been meeting with the school art teachers. They're exactly what this community needed." It was hard for Catherine to disagree. Every detail of the evening was executed flawlessly. Not flashy, but warm and inviting. This wasn't just a party. It was a statement. We belong here, and we're here to make things better. Later, as Catherine wandered toward the dining room, she caught sight of a small framed photo on the mantel. A candid shot of Marcus and Danielle standing in front of 42 Willowcrest the day they closed. Both were smiling, holding the keys. Catherine felt a pang in her chest as she remembered the day in her office when she'd refused to even set up a showing. Danielle appeared beside her, offering a plate of pastries. "Please, help yourself," she said with an easy smile. Catherine hesitated, then said quietly, "You have a beautiful home." Danielle's gaze was kind but steady. "Thank you. We've waited a long time for a place like this." It wasn't accusatory, but the weight of the words was enough to make Catherine glance down at her glass, unsure how to respond. The party had wound down. Soft jazz still played in the background, but most of the guests had said their goodbyes, leaving only a few lingering in quiet conversations near the fireplace. The warm glow of the lamps made the house feel even more intimate now, like the end of a perfect evening. Catherine stood near the entryway, her coat draped over her arm, watching Marcus and Danielle thank their last guests at the door. She had rehearsed her words all night, but each time she thought about walking up to them, something in her chest tightened. Finally, Danielle closed the door and turned toward her. "You're still here," she said warmly. "I hope you enjoyed yourself." "I did," Catherine replied, her voice softer than usual. She hesitated, glancing between the two of them. "And there's something I need to say before I go." Marcus stepped closer, his expression attentive but unreadable. Catherine took a deep breath. "The day you first came to my office, I treated you unfairly. I made an assumption based on nothing more than appearance, and I didn't give you the respect you deserved. That was wrong, deeply wrong, and I'm sorry." The words hung in the air for a moment. Danielle's eyes softened, but she didn't rush to fill the silence. Instead, she let Catherine's apology settle. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "It took courage to say that. Thank you." Catherine nodded, her throat tight. "I see now that this community, and people like me, are better for having you here. You've already done more in a few weeks than some of us have done in years. I hope you'll let me make it right somehow." Danielle's smile was gentle. "The best way to make it right is to treat the next person who walks into your office with the respect you wish you'd shown us. That's more important than anything you can do for us personally." Catherine swallowed, feeling both humbled and strangely lighter. "I will." Marcus extended his hand, and after a brief pause, Catherine shook it. His grip was steady, warm, an unspoken acknowledgement that while the past couldn't be changed, the future could be different. As Catherine stepped out into the cool night air, she glanced back once more. Through the open doorway, she saw the couple standing together in the glow of their home, laughing softly as they gathered the last of the wine glasses from the table. For the first time, Catherine didn't see them as newcomers or exceptions. She saw them simply as what they had always been, neighbors who belonged, and she silently vowed never to make the same mistake again.